All right, I think we're live, are we? Hi, everybody. Welcome to the second arts masterclass of this, shall we say, virtual pandemic season. I'm going to welcome you this morning, or this afternoon, I guess, and this morning and this evening and so on to everyone. Mr. Norman and I will be taking you through a little bit of an introduction to a little bit of what we do in the robotics pit in the arts building when we're physically in the building. So we're going to give you a quick introduction for a couple of minutes, introduce you to a virtual reality world that you can play around in, give you some guidance there. And our goal is to give you probably about 15 or more minutes to play around with some specific tasks once you've acquired a couple of the introductory skills. And you should be up and running and coding away and getting your robot to do some crazy things pretty quickly. And we'll be here to answer questions. If you have them, you can throw them up in the chat and we'll answer them as quickly as we can. So I want to start off with just sort of talking very briefly about what robotics and coding is. We've heard a lot about it. Everyone's aware of robots. Coding is a big thing. Most of the devices we have in our lives run some kind of computer code. So coding is something it's all around us, but it can be a bit of a daunting thing because of how specific the writing, the language, the syntax that needs to be used. But in some ways, it's a lot like music. Robots, computers, etc., will simply read the instructions you give them line by line. And in some cases, like music, there will be repeats. And one of the instructions will say, go back and loop and do this a few times. And then when you're done, kick back out, continue on down the process. So because a lot of computer coding languages can be daunting, I guess, when you first have a look at them and try to figure out the syntax, something called block coding was developed. And now this was years and years ago. If you've ever played with some of the Lego Mindstorms type stuff, that's what we're talking about. Some of the modern versions are pretty cool, and you're going to get to play with one of those today. And it'll be a lot like snapping Lego bricks together. And block coding really is just chunks of code, and the syntax, the language has all been pre-written, and you just grab a thing that says, hey, I want the robot to go forward, and you snap that into place. And in the background, all of the detailed code has already been worked out. And then the pieces all work together like Lego does. And you can hopefully focus more on thinking about how coding works as opposed to getting bogged down potentially in the language and the syntax. So that's what we're going to do today. Just a quick note to those of you that are joining us and you have some experience in coding, from sort of intermediate to advanced levels, you will find this a little bit simplistic perhaps because it is an introductory session. But I would encourage you to play with this anyway. There's some pretty sophisticated depth that's built into the system you're going to play with, especially when you get into autonomous systems where the robot can sense its environment and so on. And we probably won't get that through that today, but Mr. Norman and I were discussing perhaps offering a second or third class sort of on the side for those that are interested. So we're going to use something called Vex Code Vr. VR, of course, for virtual reality. And this, the coding system roughly parallels what we actually use in the robotics lab with the robots, both the novice introductory level and with our competitive robots when we go and try to, beat up other robots from other schools. And as I said, you'll be able to assemble code pretty quickly and then action it, tell the robot, hey, go run this and see what happens. And if it does what you want or doesn't, you'll be able to then make some changes and immediately see what changes, what happens when you make that change. And that's our goal today, is just to give you a sort of a quick introduction and let you play around in a virtual sandbox. So the website you want to go to, I think, was posted. It is up on the title screen. And if you missed it, it's simply just, you don't even need the www, you just need to put, there we go, thank you. It's vr.vex.com. And the benefit of this system, it was only released about a week and a half ago, is that you don't need to download anything. You don't need logins. There's no plugins that are necessary. And theoretically, it should work on just about every platform under the sun. You saw in the email, if you're using a phone, it will still work, but it may be problematic just because of the tiny size of the screen. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Norman, and he's going to give you sort of a quick walk around what this screen looks like and what we can do with it.
Excellent.
Mr. Norman.
Excellent. Hello, everybody. Welcome. I know Mr. Dollar's kind of already said that, but I'll say it as well. I'm going to share my screen here, and you guys should be very shortly seeing something that looks a lot like a window with 3 separate kind of columns on it. One's big field of dots with the when started block. Then you'll see a big column of blocks with a whole bunch of options that are probably really confusing. We'll get to that. And then you'll see a couple of little headings on the left side of your screen. So on the left side, you'll see you've got all sorts of, you've got like drivetrain, magnet, looks. For today, what we are going to be focusing on mainly is the drivetrain blocks, the looks blocks, and the control blocks. The drivetrain obviously just tells your robot how to drive. The looks block, little kind of counterintuitively, deals with the pen. And then the control is all the sensing stuff. So this is what's going to be telling your robot when to make complicated, potentially decisions, and when to do specific things under specific circumstances. That's kind of the left side of the screen. If you go into this main area, the biggest section, that's where you're actually going to be drag and dropping your code. So if I grab a block here and I can just kind of drag and drop it, you can hear there's a little snap. I don't know if you guys can hear the same thing I'm hearing, but I'm just kind of dragging random blocks. I can kind of reorder them if I want. I can disconnect, I can reconnect, I can reorder and move stuff around all left, right, and center. Up here in the kind of top right side, there's a little button called the playground. That's where you're actually going to see the robot moving. So if we click the playground button, you'll get a little kind of loading screen for a second, and then you should see some sort of map come up. There's a couple different options. You see I've got the grid map here. The one we're going to be using today is the art canvas. That's just, it's the biggest, the squares are nice and small, and the biggest advantage of this is it starts us right in the center of the little field that we're dealing with here, which is really convenient for driving around. It means we don't have to deal with moving away from a wall right off the bat. I can't actually see the chat anymore, so I'll give everybody kind of 30 seconds or so, not even, for questions. And then we will move on to actually making this robot do something. I wish I could see that. That'd be nice.
I think we're all good. And if you can raise your hand, we'll test that. If you're up and running, got the screen in front of you, stick your paw in the air and we'll be able to see a whole series. That's awesome.
I love that. That was like everyone.
Sweet.
Cool. So there's a couple of little options here. I'm going to make this screen a little bit bigger. Actually, no, I'm not, because I like to be able to see what I'm working on and what the robot is doing it all at the same time. So what we're going to get you guys to do first is we're just going to get you guys to draw an L shape, okay, with the pen down. So we're going to go back and we're going to go, if you click on the looks section over on the left side, you can see we go straight to the pen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell the robot to move the pen down. That's what this instruction does. And then I'm going to tell it to set it to, I'm going to go with blue because I like blue. You can pick your color, it doesn't really matter. That is going to tell the robot to set the pen color to blue. And then first it's going to tell it to move it down so that it's actually contacting the drawing surface. The next thing, we're going to be drawing an L shape. So we're going to just start with driving forward. There's a couple of different options for that. We could use this drive forward block, but it wouldn't last for very long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this drive forward for 200 millimeters. You can change the unit to inches if you want. I like the millimeters. I'm going to change this. I'm going to make it 400 millimeters just to make things a little bit different here, make my L shape a little bit more extreme. You can change the direction to reverse here. You can see this and don't wait thing we're not really going to worry about for now. Just know that you don't need to worry about it. Leave it as is that you're seeing right here. So if I were to run my code right now, which I do by hitting this little play button, either right here on the left side, on the bottom left side of the little playground screen, or up in the top right-hand corner up here, you can see that I've just drawn a straight blue line that's 400 millimeters long, according to this piece of code here, this line. That's not quite what I'm after. I want to draw an L shape. So what to do, what I'm going to here is reset with this button. If I wanted to, I could also change, I'm going to hide my little sensor window with this button. I can also change the angle at which I'm seeing things. So I can go down and I can click this button right here and I can get a more kind of close-up view of the robot. but I'm going to do it up. I'm going to leave it up here so that we can see the kind of shape that we're drawing. So if I run it, I get a straight line, but I don't want a straight line. I want an L. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset, and then I'm going to go turn right. And again, you could just use the simple turn right block. You could even use the turn to heading block, but that's a little bit more complicated. So I'm just going to use this turn right for 90-degree block. That'll make a 90-degree corner, which is what an L looks like. Then I'm going to take another drive forward block. And since L's aren't quite the same length, all in the same, the two different straight lines, they're not the same length, I'm going to leave this one as a 200-millimeter line. Now, I'm going to check this over to make sure this is all good. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this play button. And if I've done this right, which it looks like I have, you should see that my robot has drawn, it's upside down and backwards, but it is nonetheless in the shape of an L. We can go back, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of move this to the side here. Hopefully everybody can see. So I'm going to move this to the side, and I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to do it a little bit differently. I'm going to move the robot pen down, set the robot pen color to black. I am going to now use this block again, except I'm going to use the turn to heading block, which is slightly different. I'm going to turn to heading. What am I going to turn to heading? I'm going to turn to heading. It's going to be 270 degrees. This is just going to do exactly the same thing in a slightly different way. So turn to heading 270 degrees, and then we're going to drive forward for another 200 millimeters. Make this 400. I'm going to reset, and then I'm going to move this. I'll make it a little bigger so we can see, and then I'm going to play, and you'll see if I've done a good job. My robot should turn a full, almost the whole way around, and then do an L in the other direction. So it's just a matter of picking which direction you want your robot to turn. You could accomplish the same thing with either of the blocks. I just wanted to change it up and show you guys that there are options for what you're doing. What we are going to move on to now, if everybody's feeling pretty good, is using kind of a repeat and taking our code to the slightly the next level and drawing a square with not just, we could draw a square by repeating the same thing over and over and over again, but that's kind of gets really boring really, really fast. We can do something that's a little bit more powerful. We can actually allow ourselves to just write one piece of code and have it do the same thing 4 times. And we're going to do that with the repeat command. So again, we don't need to repeat the moving the pen down and the setting the pen color thing. So we're going to leave that outside the block. But this part right here, we're going to repeat only these 2 lines of code 4 times to make a square. You could repeat it more, but you just end up going over the same place over and over and over again. So I'm going to click the playground to open this window up. And once it loads, I'm going to make it smaller, move it over. And now we are going to, I think I'm going to have a quick look. We're going to run our code. And if we've done a good job, we should draw a square. So now it's turning right. And now you can see there's a little green highlight around the piece of code that it's doing. And now we're done. So it repeated driving forward for 400 millimeters and then turning right. It repeated each of those things 4 times, and we get a perfect little square. We could do a very similar thing. We could make this 200 and we draw a square also, but we would draw a slightly different size square. So we're going to do another square without erasing anything, and you can see I get a square that's a different size. And again, you can change the color. You could even move the pen up and draw like 3 parts of a square. You could do, so we can, let's say we drag, let's drag this guy in halfway here. What are we gonna get? Is it gonna work? And since it moves the pen up and then never moves it back down, we only get 1 section of this line. Okay. So I think I'm going to pass it over. I'm moving things left, right, and center. We are going to let you guys go through some of the kind of more complicated activities. There's a couple different things we're going to get you guys to do. I will pass it over to Mr. Doler and allow him to explain that.
All right, I think we're here. Now, thanks very much, Mr. Norman. So you've got a pretty good introduction to the kinds of things that we can do. There's a lot more here, and we don't have enough time to go through all the bits and pieces. The real benefit of this is that you can snap things together. If you're curious about what something will do, change a number, pop things apart, snap another grid in there, put an extra repeat inside a repeat, change the pen color, and then hit that reset button, the little circle in the playground, and then hit play and see what changes. And that feedback, play, change something, see what happens, is really the strength here. So as a challenge, we don't want to yammer on for the whole block here. Have some play time. What we're going to do is we're going to sort of sit here. We'll be available in the chat if you've got a specific question. And you could challenge yourself to draw a square where each side is a different color. Or if you complete a square, as Mr. Norman did there with a repeat function, what you could do is you could stick after that. It's done it 4 times, for instance, and then snap something on the bottom that just changes the robot's heading by 10 degrees or 15 degrees, and then put a repeat around the whole thing. And that'll tell it to draw a square by moving 4 times, doing the same thing, and then it will alter its heading a little bit and then draw another square. And I'm going to toss it a term called Spirograph, which is a kickback to, I think, my childhood. But it's the little toy with gears, and you put a pen in, and it creates neat spirally patterns. And you can kind of do that sort of thing here. So you could challenge yourself to do that. A couple of other ideas, if you want to try something out with a little bit of specifics to it, is could you make a hexagon following the same model? And obviously play with the colors. The pen's nice because it leaves a trace, and you've got your 4 color options. As it's running, change the camera view to the angled view, and you can also zoom in, zoom out. All right, on your trackpad, you want to pinch and one or open up, and you can also click and move around the camera view and watch the robot run around on its own. All right, so we're going to turn it over. You got about 10 minutes just to play, and right towards the end at around 2:30. We'll toss out a couple of other ideas, and this is accessible anytime. The one thing we did want to mention before I forget is that you can go up in the corner to the file, and I'll see if I could just pop my screen open here and get that up and running, because I can share this, and I think I'm going to put myself out of the way here. If you go up in the top corner here, you can see there's a file button. Whoops, sorry about this. Lots of buttons to hit. This file button up here, and it says save to your device. If you go on your computer, whatever device you're using, create a folder and just call it Vex Projects or Vex Code Vr Projects. And then when you save it, give it a name, and you can go back to it later. You can close the website down, close your browser down, and then go pick up where you left off. So you can tinker and play, and then if the mood strikes you on the weekend, you can go back and add some more things in. All right?
And the easiest way to add names to things, hopefully everybody can hear me, the little blue box that currently says Vex Code Project, that's where you add your name. So you click that, you type in whatever you want to call it, then you can save it, and then there we go. Mr. Doler's Robotics Awesomeness. He clicks rename. Now he goes and he clicks file, and he clicks save to your device, and it will be saved under the name that you've just created it. So it's fairly straightforward, fairly intuitive. All you've got to do is very similar to giving like a Word document's name, just type in the name you want.
So we invite you to play, and we'll be here to answer questions. And Mr. Norman and I are going to hang around after 2:30. A couple of words right at the end, and then we'll just hang around if you want to continue to play probably until about 5 to 3. And we both have meetings to run off to at that point. So enjoy. And if you've got any questions, you can always email us directly. And there are lots of tutorials and a bunch of challenge activities that kind of walk you through things up in the top left-hand corner. If you want to noodle around on your own and find out what some of those other buttons do. So enjoy. I hope this has been a pleasant introduction to coding and robotics. And yeah, we're going to hang out, go and play, and fire your questions off in the chat. I'll leave mine up and so you can sort of see what I'm working on. I'm going to open up one project here. So this one, I've actually got a loop with a repeat inside of a repeat. And I'm going to take a crack at doing a hexagon. So I'm changing my angle by 60 degrees. And when I'm finished the hexagon, I'm going to just have it, when it gets back to its starting point, it's going to adjust itself by 10 degrees and draw the same hexagon again. And I've got the speed set up a little bit higher. So you should see, there we go. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so you can sort of see what it's doing in. And I'll pan it around. Might be a little choppy for you at home, but. And there's the adjustment, 10 degrees. And I'm using a couple of different colors per side just for fun. I'm going to switch to the top view just so you can see what that looks like. And there's our spirograph. So I'm just going to flip to the overhead view, and you can sort of see how this starts to, this geometric pattern is slowly coming together, which is just a series of hexagons, and they're just rotating by 10 degrees each time it goes around the loop. And again, you can see where in the code the robot is because it flashes briefly as we go through it. So we're almost at time. And so what we wanted, Mr. Norman and I wanted to leave you with really is there's a lot more here, as I mentioned. If you scan down the side here, we start to get into a whole section on sensing. This robot has bumpers. It has what are called ultrasonic, or at least the virtual equivalent of ultrasonic rangefinders. So it can see objects by bouncing sound waves off of it. We have the real thing in the actual robotics lab, but this is the virtual version. So you can tell it, for instance, to just drive forward blindly, but ping things until it gets within, let's say, 50 centimeters of an object. And then it will, you can tell it, if that is the case, stop and turn right, or pick a random direction. And that's, in a very sort of simple sense, how a Roomba might operate. The little vacuum cleaners that run around your house, they have a couple of different ways that they sense objects, by bumping into them or by sensing with ultrasonic frequencies, and they just sort of randomly bounce around your house, and after a certain amount of time of randomness, they vacuumed your house for you. So feel free to explore, and you can't break it. You can just throw things in there and stuff doesn't work, and you take it back out and you figure it out, and play with things in that regard. So we hope you've enjoyed this, and we're going to hang out here for a little while longer, another 25 minutes or so. If you want to keep playing, by all means do, and please feel free to fire us some questions. All right, and I think from Mr. Norman and myself, thanks for joining us for today's masterclass, and hopefully you'll have some fun this weekend releasing your inner robot. And if you're still with us, the robot should stop right about now with the last loop around to complete the pattern.
That pattern takes a long time to do.
Boom.
When I first saw that, I was so confused as to what shape it was, because right now it just looks like a whole bunch of random lines.
Kind of, yeah. It's a little bit crazy. All right, so we still see there's about 100 people in the room, which is awesome. You are free, but if you want to hang around, please join us. And that's what she looks like. I'm going to pinch it out a little bit here so you can see a sort of an oblique angle. We'll just zoom out slowly and have a look there, and you can sort of see the pattern from the side.